A letter attributed to Mozart has reinforced an image of his legendary creative thinking prowess, and as a consequence highlights how different his creative genius is from you and me. In this famous letter, Mozart begins by saying that when he is relaxed and in good cheer, say walking after a good meal, ideas begin to form as if from nowhere. As he said, "Whence and how they come, I know not, nor can I force them. Those ideas that please me, I retain in memory." So it would seem that ideas occurred to him as if by magic. Later in the letter it says, "When I proceed to write down my ideas, I take them out of the bag of my memory, if I may use that phrase, what has been previously collected into it in a way I have mentioned. For this reason, the committing to paper is done quickly enough, for everything is, as I said before, already finished." Unfortunately, this letter perpetuates some of the myths about the creative process, especially the creative process skills possessed by creative geniuses. First, it purports that ideas come to us, well, to Mozart, as if from out of the blue. Second, it makes it sound as if great works emerge whole and complete, requiring no revision. Poof, there it is. The reality is, this rarely happens. The authenticity of the letter is in doubt, and some scholars now conclude that it is indeed a forgery. And the truth is, it doesn't represent Mozart's actual creative process. Instead, a review of Mozart's manuscripts show that he was constantly revising his music. He edited his thinking, crossing out sections, rewriting whole sections, jotting down vague ideas and setting them aside for later use, sometimes months and years later. Despite the legend supported by the forged letter, the truth is he created like us ordinary humans. Mozart worked hard at perfecting his ideas. Picasso's enigmatic personality, his avant-garde style, along with the fact that he did not reveal his creative process, reinforced his legendary status as a gifted creative genius. However, since his death, it's been revealed that Picasso, like Mozart, worked very hard at his craft. Between 1894 and 1967, Picasso created 175 notebooks of his draft ideas, concepts, and pre-work. To understand how much effort went into creating a final work, we will discuss one of his most famous pieces. In 1907, he showed a piece called Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This was a radical departure from past work, and the piece that helped launch Cubism. The painting features 5 women in various poses. The images mix soft human flesh with sharp angles. The women's faces are expressionless. 8 full notebooks were prepared before the final work was produced. Modifications over time included changing the number of female figures. The 2 figures on the right were added later. At first, they had Iberian facial features, which were later changed to look like African masks. Men were included at times in the painting, a sailor and a medical student. And the medical student changed over time, once holding a skull and other times a book. Postures and poses were modified. Additional preparatory work included a complete oil sketch and a complete pencil sketch found folded and tucked into one of his notebooks. Howard Gardner, Harvard professor and creativity scholar, indicated that the notebook served a crucial role in Picasso's creative process, allowing Picasso to experiment privately with his own transformation as an artist, moving from his Rose period to what would become Cubism. So, why these 2 stories? Mozart and Picasso, they're the poster boys for innate creative talent, geniuses to be revered. We assume they possess some special creative talent. Rather, instead of thinking of them as creative legends, to be revered, that they had something special. Rather, what we can begin to understand is that they worked very hard. By revering them, the consequence becomes that we might underestimate and sometimes not engage in the hard work required to be creative. This lecture goes more deeply into the develop step of the process. Mozart and Picasso show us how to refine ideas. Designers are also very good at refining ideas. To help them, they create prototypes. Design thinking has become very popular. It's a model for creative process, a deliberate way of engaging in creative thinking. Many companies now have design thinking incorporated into their work. Procter & Gamble is an excellent example of this. Many universities in their business schools now teach design thinking. Even in schools, schools have begun to teach children design thinking. The strength of design thinking is that it takes what's called a user-centered approach. Let's look at some of the principles of the design thinking process. I think it's good to overview these principles because they serve as a reminder for some of the foundational principles in this course. Here's the first principle: reframing. Reframing is all about stepping back and looking at the situation differently. Are there assumptions that stop you from identifying the real business challenge? What are the hidden opportunities? We're moving from the problem as initially given to us to a deeper understanding. Collaborate. This is all about appreciating diversity, working in cross-disciplinary teams, drawing inspiration from many settings to gain different perspectives. User understanding is the next principle. Really get to know your user, his or her real behaviors and real needs, digging deeply into both the needs that you see as well as the unarticulated needs. Ideation. This is the belief that no idea is too wild. In design thinking, we generate many human-centered solutions. We create many choices, and then we work from there. And then finally, prototyping, which is all about testing it out. We use simple and inexpensive material to quickly test the idea. Role plays can be used, and other methods to get into the user's mindset, and also to share with users and to get their feedback to what we've created. This involves the user early on in the development process. The process and tools in this course have already addressed most of these principles, especially reframing, collaborate, and ideation. We're in the develop step of creative problem solving, and as such, we will borrow the principles of prototyping and user feedback for this lecture. Before the tools, let's look at the process of design thinking. Like creative problem solving, design thinking has a process and it has tools. Here are the basic steps of design thinking. The first step is to understand. It's observation. It's problem identification. Sometimes designers go out and engage in ethnographic research, where they closely observe the users, trying to understand their real frustrations and their real needs. Sometimes uncovering needs that the user's not even aware of, that the observer can see, the designer can see. Next is ideate. This information is then taken and brainstorming occurs. Many alternatives are generated in terms of concepts for products and services that might meet the user's needs. In the fourth step, it's prototyping. It's quickly testing ideas, trying to create working models. In the next step, in test, we get feedback from the users and we iterate, working until our solution really works, getting feedback, making modifications, testing again. To see this in action, there's a terrific video from the old Nightline program. It was a late-night news broadcast program that was hosted by Ted Koppel. Many years ago, they did a special on design thinking. They worked with IDEO, the design company in California. They presented IDEO with a fun challenge. They challenged IDEO to redesign the shopping cart and in only 1 week. It's a great example of the design thinking process at work, the process I just described to you. We're going to look specifically at tools from the prototyping step of this process. So, solution prototyping. What that is creating a working model of the solution. It generally goes beyond a sketch. If possible, it's an actual working model that can then be given to users. We observe the users interacting with the prototype so that we can improve our concept. Now, actual working model varies from field to field. It can be done in any field, but it'll vary in terms of what an actual working model means. For example, TV programs run pilots. These are prototypes. Architects make 3D models. These are prototypes. Biologists, Watson and Crick, built enormous stick models to refine their understanding of DNA. When I was an assistant professor and teaching undergraduate courses, we had students in our introductory course create an invention. They kept a journal where they did observations, that first phase of the design thinking process, and then that led into concepts. At the end of the semester, they had to present an invention. They had to build a working model. They had to build a prototype. Here are some of the more interesting examples. So one young man was in his dormitory with some friends, and they had ordered pizza. When the pizza arrived, they had no plates, so it was kind of awkward to eat the pizza. He thought to himself, gosh, this is frustrating. Is there a way to solve this? What if plates came along with the pizza box? So what he presented to the class was a pizza box that had perforated circles, 4 of them cut in the top of the pizza box with a little place to stick your finger in and pop out a plate. So every pizza box came with 4 plates. You had your pizza and you could serve it to 4 people on 4 plates. One student was a musician, a drummer. And when he was performing, he would perspire and the sticks would slip out of his hands. He wanted to solve this problem, so he put loops on the end of the drumsticks. He brought his drum kit into the classroom and he demonstrated how this worked. When the drumstick slipped out, he was able to snap it back because the loop was there to allow him to flick the drumstick back into his hand. Another student created a bottle with a removable bottom. He was getting ready to go out for the evening. He went into the bathroom to get to a hair care product to finish styling his hair, and there was a little bit of the product left in the bottle, but the pump wouldn't get it out. And he thought to himself, there's enough product there, I just can't get to it. Only if I could take the bottom of the bottle off. And so he came in with a prototype that had a bottle that you could unscrew the bottom, use your finger to get the product that was there, and that solved the problem for him. You see, a physical creation significantly enhances the development. You get to interact with the idea. Many businesses now have rooms for design thinking where they can do rapid prototyping. But a word of caution. Even at the prototype stage, beware of premature convergence. Automakers use prototypes all the time. But if engineers focus only on the prototype, a study found that it can shut down their creative development of the product, where they begin to merely defend and attack the prototype. And this is a risk for high developers. Remember, high developers get stuck in developing the perfect solution. They might not want to move away from the prototype because they've already put so much energy into developing it. Instead, use prototype to focus on asking questions and developing solutions, as we've discussed here. Let's go to another tool. This is called Foresight Scenario, another design thinking tool. This tool uses trends to generate future solutions to a situation. It's looking to the future. Now, when we say Foresight Scenario, this is F-O-R-E, foresight, not the F-O-U-R, foresight that you learned earlier that identifies your preferences within the creative process. Foresight Scenario has 6 steps to it. You list the trends and select the most important. You're trying to predict the future. You're trying to see where trends will take you into the future. You then identify 2 trends that you think are most likely to occur. You use these 2 trends to create a 2x2 box. And then for each box, you write a scenario. What would this look like? You're projecting yourself into the future, looking around to see if these trends were to come true, what would that look and feel like? And then you create a label for each quadrant. You take your ideas from the ideate step, and you then place them into these scenarios. The ideas that you identified, maybe from doing hits, the ones that you culled down, the ones that seem most promising. And you place them into one of the boxes, one of the scenarios that best fits that idea, best goes along with that idea. Then you look across the ideas and you combine the ideas within quadrants and sometimes across quadrants. And then you write a brief summary for each solution. Let's take an example. Imagine you are a restaurant entrepreneur and you're looking for new opportunities. Here's how you might go through this tool. You start by thinking about the trends in food. And I would recommend using divergent thinking to not just think of the first few trends that occur to your mind, but multiple trends. So let's say you evaluate these trends and you decide to focus on these 2, the speed of food and the nature of food. For each trend, we need to define the end of a continuum, 2 poles. The speed of food, we might say one end is fast food and on the other end is slow food. For the nature of food, on one end we might have organic, on the other end we might have non-organic. You now take these and you create your 2x2 box. So following this example, you might place slow food on the top of the vertical axis and fast food on the bottom of that axis, on the bottom of that line. Then you'll create a horizontal axis that cuts through the vertical axis. On the left side, you might have non-organic. On the right side, organic. We now think about the scenarios that occur where these intersect. We write a description, and then we come up with a label to put into each box. So where we have non-organic meeting slow food in the top left corner, we would call that perhaps hurry up and wait. Moving clockwise in the right corner, where we have slow food intersecting with organic, we might call that farm to mouth. In the bottom right, where we have organic connecting to fast food, we might call that mobile fresh food. And then finally, in the left lower quadrant, where we have non-organic interfacing with fast food, we might call that meals on the go. We now take the ideas that we ideated earlier, that we've converged on, and we place them into this 2x2 matrix, where the idea fits best. What scenario does it connect to? From there, we then connect ideas, linking them, trying to create more robust solutions. By way of example, let's say in the farm to mouth, we have 2 ideas that we think go together. One idea is to bring people to the farm. Another idea is to prepare food on the farm. And connecting these 2 might suggest, hey, gosh, maybe we can open up a restaurant on the farm. Let's look at another example. If we go to the lower left quadrant, meals on the go. One of the ideas there might be food vans for an existing chain. We connect that to another idea in the lower right quadrant that also deals with vans, maybe using vans to distribute fresh produce. Combining these 2 ideas might suggest this solution. Hey, how about mobile restaurants for existing chains that offer organic options? In step 6, you then evaluate and develop your ideas into the ones that you think are most likely to be successful. You think about which trends are more likely to occur, and then you go with those solutions that align with those trends. But ask yourself, which scenarios may not occur? How might situations change, and how can I then adapt my ideas as we go forward? In our example, let's say, for example, that you sense that people won't come to the farm for restaurants. And mobile food is pretty popular now. So you might decide to go with creating mobile vans for existing fast food restaurants with healthy food choices. You would solicit feedback from others by presenting this idea to them, and then make adjustments if you need to. The next tool is called Solution Storyboard. Earlier, you learned about storyboard in the clarify step, clarifying the challenges that must be addressed to move from the current reality to your desired future. We use storyboard like a cartoon strip. Remember, 6 panels, to capture the story that looked at how we might overcome the challenges to get to our desired future. Now, we're going to look at storyboard in a slightly different way, as a way of refining solutions. The tools that you've presented often can be used flexibly. Brainstorming, for example, we learned brainstorming in the ideate step, but brainstorming can be used in other areas of the process. You can use brainstorming to generate challenges. You can use brainstorming to generate action steps. That happens to be a fairly flexible tool. We're going to look at storyboard as a way of prototyping. Again, this is specifically called the solution storyboard. With Solution Storyboard, you're storyboarding the user's experience, the user's journey as he or she interacts with your proposed solution. The story is told from the perspective of the individual who is using this proposed change, what you want to bring into the world. And the panels in the story show the user's experience of the intended solution. What it does is helps us to create empathy, gets us out of our own heads and into their experience. Here's an example. Walt Disney used storyboarding to understand how families would experience Disneyland. The insights gained from the storyboard helped Disney to understand better how he wanted guests to enter and move about the park. Maybe this is why when you're standing in lines at Disney that you're entertained in ways to take your attention away from having to stand in line. Let's try this out. I want you to imagine that you're a designer. And we're going to design a car. Now, we've talked about cars before. Let's imagine you're going to redesign the car. You're good at divergent thinking. You've been exposed to divergent thinking. Think about what you might want to create. How might you redesign some aspect of the car? Get that in your mind. Select a design change or two. Now I'm going to walk you through the solution storyboard, sort of like a quick thought experiment. Imagine characters using your design. Who's using it? How do you see them interacting with this design? Map out in your mind, like you're seeing a story unfolding, how they're first responding to that design change. And then as they're engaging and using that design change, see how they're responding to it from beginning, middle, and end. Change the character. Try a teen driver. Try a senior. Do they respond differently as they react to this design change that you have in mind? We've gone through this quickly. I facilitated you in applying this as a structured tool, but even quickly, it can help to advance our thinking. Did you find that as you pictured that story, that even using it quickly, it helped you to see ways to improve the design of that particular solution that you had in mind and how you might improve it. Let's look at another tool. It's called solution enactment. Why do dress rehearsals? Why start off Broadway first? Solution enactment is a kind of dress rehearsal. We act out our proposed solution to see how we might improve it. Before going fully live, let's see the solution in action. Solution enactment is a kind of storytelling that allows developers to communicate abstract ideas to potential users, where the storyboard that we just went through puts the users into the whole context. Solution enactment takes the audience through specific scenes. This has 5 steps, including a number of preparatory steps before we actually get into the enactment. We begin by looking at we envision the user's journey. We visualize the user's experience. We identify key areas in which the user is benefiting from the proposed solution, and we sketch this out. Then we explore a range of possible encounters. We explore different experiences that might occur. We record a range of possibilities, and we decide which ones we want to focus on in the enactment. We select those, and then we highlight them. We highlight the solution's value relative to those, and we display engaging interactions. And then it's important to rehearse the dramatization. We conduct practice sessions, we videotape them, and we improve upon them. We then present the enactment to the stakeholders. We carry out a brief presentation to an audience. If there's time, we solicit feedback and we insert suggestions immediately. Even novelists have used this kind of approach, from Charles Dickens to Franz Kafka. Writers have gathered with a group of friends to read drafts of their work out loud, and then they solicit feedback. We capture this feedback and discuss next step. We gather formal and informal feedback from our audience, and we revise our solution. And if we have enough time, we represent it and make adjustments. What are the benefits? It's like a dress rehearsal. Solution enactment allows us to go for a test drive. And it helps to broaden design thinking beyond tangible products. It can be easily used for proposed new services. Another benefit is it helps us to build empathy with our user. How often do we assume that something's clear? Then we're surprised when others don't get it. And finally, it gets our stakeholders involved in the development process early. Charles Darwin said that all species are descended from some past prototype. Ideas are prototypes too. All ideas are evolving into something else. iPad, the space shuttle, or a masterpiece painting don't emerge from a vacuum. Apple's iPad debuted in 2010, but prototypes began 8 years earlier, long before the price for touchscreen technology had come down. Here's a story of someone who seems to naturally use, or maybe he learned to use, design thinking. It's been reported that Frank Gehry, creator of the Walt Disney Concert Hall in California and the Guggenheim Museum in Spain, is one of the most influential architects of our time. In an era of computer technology and design, he still takes a hands-on approach to his creative process. Like a good design thinker, he begins by getting a thorough description of the site and function of the building. In fact, Gehry says, the more you know, the freer you are. He then ideates, quickly sketching rough ideas. Once happy with the conceptual design, he then moves to prototyping. He works with associates to cut, fold, crease, crush, and glue various materials together into physical models, and of various scales. Learning ways to improve from the models, he then scans it into a sophisticated computer. Gehry's process seems to follow the design thinking process I described earlier: observe, ideate, prototype, and iterate. And it would certainly seem that prototypes provide the crucial bridge from initial concept to final design. The 4 design tools that you've been exposed to help better our solutions through design thinking. The tools that we reviewed, the tools that we went through, were prototyping, foresight scenario, solution storyboard, and solution enactment. Sometimes it's tough for implementers to be patient, but it's valuable. The cost of an error goes up dramatically after the solution is launched. Consider automobile recalls. These are expensive propositions, not just in the cost to repair faulty work, but also potential lawsuits as well, and in the worst case, the loss of lives. If the faulty design had been caught during the development phase, it would be a much less costly proposition for auto companies. I want you to take one of these tools and practice prototyping on a real situation. Match the design tool to your needs. For example, if you have a tangible product, perhaps solution prototyping will work best for you. If you're focused on future possibilities, you might want to use foresight scenario. If you want to understand a solution in the context of the user's experience, use solution storyboard. If you're developing a new service or experience for others, use solution enactment. Test whether the prototyping helped you. I'm confident it will. See you next time.